Welcome to Work from the Inside Out, a podcast that highlights real-life stories, practical strategies, and best practices for transitioning your career from unhappiness and dissatisfaction to fulfillment, meaning, and joy. Now here is your host, career and executive coach, Tammy Guler-Loeb.
Hey everybody, I am so delighted to introduce you today to my guest, Paula Rizzo. Paula is an Emmy Award-winning television producer, best-selling author, media trainer, and strategist. As a former senior health producer for Fox News Channel for more than a decade, she produced segments with a range of top experts, including J.J. Virgin, Jillian Michaels, and Deepak Chopra. A media veteran for nearly 20 years, she also worked in local news in New York City as a producer for WCBS, WPIX, and WLNY. She coaches experts and executives to perform better on camera and produce their own videos. She's the founder of listproducer.com and the author of Listful Living, a list-making journey to a less stressed you, and Listful Thinking, using lists to be more productive, highly successful, and less stressed. She's also co-creator of Lights Camera Expert, an online course geared towards helping entrepreneurs, authors, and experts get media attention. Paula also teaches Become a Video Star, a virtual workshop that empowers experts to create their own compelling videos. Paula has been featured in major media outlets like foxnews.com, Business Insider, and the Daily News. She's a contributor to mindbodygreen.com, entrepreneur.com, and Thrive Global. A veteran speaker, she's presented at the Mass Conference for Women, How Design Live, New York Women in Communications, the National Association of Professional Organizers, and many others. And please join me in welcoming Paula Rizzo. Hey, Paula.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to dive in and talk.
Yay. So as you know, Paula, work from the inside out. You have had a very rich career, lots of exciting twists and turns. So take us back to the early years and where you started and how things developed along the way to where you are now.
I've always been a very curious person. And so I think that's what really led me into the world of journalism. I fell in love with TV very early on, even in college. And when I started working in TV news, I just felt like, oh, this is it. This is what I love. It's fast paced. We're able to inform people. I get to become an expert in something new every single day. I just really loved that environment. And for me, really fun to sort of grow up in the news because you really get a front row seat to see what's happening in the world. And both in local news and then in national news, the way that stories are told. When I first started working in television, everything was on tape. And now everything is digital. So to also see, the evolution of technology was really fun. And, now that I look back and think about my career, it was always about writing. That was always it. When I was a little girl, I always thought, oh, I'm going to be a writer. I'm going to write a book one day. And I never thought I'd write 2 books about list making. I didn't think that was going to be the book, but that's really what it is. And so being in television, being able to tell stories fast and to inform people has really helped every step of the way in my career as being a writer.
So I'm curious about the little girl for a moment. What kind of book did you think you would write, or what made you as a little girl want to write?
I was just so interested in informing people, telling people things they didn't know.
Huh.
So even if it was just, a little tidbit here or there, even with my parents or whoever, just to be able to say, oh, see their reaction when you
Ah.
were the first one to tell them, like, oh, I didn't know that was the case. I had started when I was 8 years old. I had a newsletter that I would write, and I would distribute it around the house, right, to my parents and to my stuffed animals. And it was, things like, silly things like what's for dinner and an interview I did with my grandpa, stuff like that, where I was just curious and I wanted to just get out there. I was on the yearbook in high school and the newspaper. It just, I don't know, it was in my blood.
So did you major in journalism in college? Is that what you did?
I did. I started as a print journalism major, and then they make you take a class in broadcast. And
Oh,
then, vice versa. If you're a broadcast, you have to take print classes. But the writing is very different, for print versus broadcast. It's very, very different. And as soon as I took that print class, the broadcast class, I was like, oh, this feels way better. This I understand. This is really, this really feels terrific. And years before, I actually had the opportunity to go to ABC News as a kid because my friend had her dad was a cameraman for ABC News.
oh, okay.
And so he took us one day to see the set and to see everything. And I got to see Peter Jennings' desk and his office. I didn't get to meet him. He wasn't there yet, but it was really exciting. And so that sort of stuck in my head. So when I was in college and I was like, oh, wait a minute, I really liked that experience. This feels more in line with what I'd like to do.
Yeah. Wow. So it sounds like from a fairly young age, there was a little bit of a bug that kind of bit you and
For
intrigued
sure.
you. Yeah. And so once you finished school, you went after a job, or did you do internships early on, or?
It was an internship. And so I had done an internship. I went to Hofstra University in New York, which is a great school for broadcast. And I did an internship as part of my, senior year at a local TV station, which is WLNY, which turned into my first job. And so my last semester at college, I was actually doing both. I would go to class all day, and then their newscast wasn't until 11 p.m. So I was a writer for the newscast. So I started as an intern, and then I got a writing position. So
Oh,
I was really doing everything, for that last semester, and
wow.
then that turned into, my first real job.
Wow. And what was your actual first real job? Was it a writing job?
It was a writer, yeah. It was a broadcast writer. So it was a half-hour show, and the producer would pick what stories we were going to do, and then assign all of the writers, what you were going to write, and you would write up, short reads for the anchor to read during the newscast. 25 seconds, 30 seconds, depending on what it is. So you'd write up all your stuff, and it's interesting because it was such a small shop that I would also do camera.
Oh, really?
Yes. So I'd write the whole show. We'd give it to the anchor, and then I'd go out and do camera 3. I'd be like the camera operator. So
Oh,
it was
wow.
really fun to be able to see all the behind the scenes. It was a small crew. It was like a little family. It's actually where I met my husband.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he was a sports producer there at the time. And so we sort of grew up in the TV world together.
Wow. I think what a great way to learn too, though, about a profession and an industry and a field, to be in a relatively small shop where you do get your feet wet in a number of different functions, and to see, even if you're not doing all the functions, to see up close how different things work. That must
Yeah.
have been an amazing opportunity.
It was. And, I thought initially when I started, looking into broadcast, I thought, oh, I'd like to be an anchor or a reporter or something. And then when I got to see what, the dynamics are and what happens, I saw what the producer did. And I thought, they have their finger on every single thing that's going on in that newscast. That's interesting to me, rather than just the one piece of it. And so it's a different skill set. And also, producers get to be bossy. They get to be the boss. They get to be the ones that tell everybody what to do. And I was like, that feels kind of good to me. So it was the way that I went. So, it really was the progression of it from being a writer to then, in that small TV station, they did give me a chance to learn how to produce a live newscast. I was able to shadow the producer and learn what it was like. We did it by hand. We didn't have computers computers do it. That's how it's
Yeah.
done in most newsrooms, is with a computer. I did
Yeah.
it by hand with a stopwatch. It's a very, very different way of doing it, but it really helped me to learn that skill and to learn timing and to understand, okay, how long is this really going? And do we really need to give that much time to each story? And really understanding, what weight are you giving a story if you give it more time or less time?
Wow. What a great training ground you had there. And so did you became a producer there then?
I left as a writer. I left and I went to WPIX here in New York, which is Channel 11.
I remember I grew up in New York.
Yes, yes. And I was hired there as a freelancer. So I left a full-time job to do a freelance gig. And it was to get my foot in the door. The first station was on Long Island. It was a small station.
Right.
And I got that first job and it was great, but I needed to move up. There were only so many places I could go. And most of the people who were the producers weren't going anywhere. So I realized, you know what, I need to make a move to a place that maybe, has more opportunity. So I did go to Channel 11. I started as a writer and I worked my way up to associate producer while I was there and won an Emmy Award while I was there with that team.
Oh, well, congratulations.
Thank you.
Now, you won the Emmy when you were still freelancing there or when you were already on staff there?
I was then staff. Yeah. So I was freelance for, a couple months or something. And then I moved my way up and then I was able to, get that staff position. I became a copy editor, they had called it at the time. And then I started producing some shows on the weekends and getting my feet wet with that. But yeah, the Emmy was part of the team that I was on for Best Newscast. And it was interesting too, because it was for me as a young person thinking, okay, I'm going to leave this full-time job that gives me benefits and that, I've been here, I'm going to go to this other job where they're not guaranteeing my time. They're telling me I'll probably get 3 days a week at least, but that you don't know. So that for me was really scary because it wasn't what I was taught. I was taught, like my parents were like, you get a job with benefits and full-time and that's what you do. And, they were very supportive, but it just wasn't the thing that I thought you were supposed to do. So it was a risk.
So how did you manage that risk? You must have loved it so much that you were clearly willing to take the risk, but how did that work out for you over that period of time?
I could see that I could be really good at it. And I knew I could see that the dynamic was working and I liked learning and showing up. And I said, if I come as my best possible person and I really show them my stuff, I know they're going to want to hire me. And I'll never forget, I was still freelance at the time and I was doing I wasn't writing, I was copy editing. So the copy editor sort of goes over what all the writers, it assigns all the stories to the writers and then, edits their work. The editor, the copy editor was out that day. And so they didn't have anybody else who could do it. So they put me in to do it. And I want to say, I think it was the Staten Island ferry crash or something. It was like a big story in New York. It was a big day. And I remember that I was in the meeting that would have an afternoon meeting. And the news director, I remember as we're all leaving, he pulled my other boss over and he goes, "Who is that girl? Who is she? Why is she in this meeting? What's happening?" And I was just like, she didn't even know me yet, So I was still new, but I was really, really eager. I knew that if I got in there, even though I was a freelancer and even, and it worked out for me.
Yeah. So how much time elapsed between the time you were a freelancer there and the time they actually offered you a permanent role? Do you remember?
It was a couple of months. It wasn't that long. Yeah, it wasn't that long. Yeah. It was a pretty good deal.
So, clearly your enthusiasm, even now, that was many years ago, right? So your enthusiasm even now is sort of showing up even in this conversation. But I'm curious, it sounds like, you showed up with lots of confidence, lots of energy, and just you were determined to show them that you had everything it took to do the job and then some. And I think that, there's a lot of words that we might use for that, in, I don't know, the world of career coaching, or I don't even know what world it is, but, but I think, you go into something, you set an intention, like, I'm going to nail this. And you did. And you had every intention of making this work out. And clearly it did.
Yeah. Yeah.
So by the time they offered you a permanent role, what was that role exactly that they offered you?
That role was the copy editor job.
It was the
And
copy
so,
editor.
yeah. So the copy editor had left. And so that position was available. And I was right there like, hey, I remember going into the office and saying, hey, I know that he's leaving. I'm sad he's leaving, but also I know you have to fill that position. So I would like to be considered. And so it's, it sort of went from there. And then I would fill in produce as well.
I see. And then that led to doing producing. I see.
Yeah.
Wow.
Mhm.
So, and how long were you at WPIX?
I was there about 3 or 4 years,
Uh-huh.
probably.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And what propelled you then to make another change at that point?
Again, it was the opportunity. At the time, they only had 2 shows at the time. Now it's much different. Now they have a lot of different shows, but at the time there was a 10 p.m. show, which was my show, and they had a morning show. And I remember there was an opportunity where a producer had left the morning show or was about to leave the morning show. And so I was like, you know what? This is my chance. Let me interview. Let me do it. And so I interviewed and they let me shadow the producer for 2 weeks. And I thought that was a great experience to be able to see this other show because morning shows are different than evening shows.
Yeah.
And in the end, I didn't get the job. And I remember being really crushed and really upset about it and just like, this place,
Yeah.
But it was the best thing that happened because I would have hated being on the morning show. That is something, the hours are killer.
Oh, like getting up at 2 in the morning to go to work.
Gosh, yeah. And I did it for 2 weeks and I was sort of miserable, but I was like, it's okay. But then when I looked back, I was like, you know what, I wouldn't have been able to really sustain it. But it did give me the kick to say, okay, well, what else is out there? Let's see what else is out there. And, I was interviewing a bunch of places and ended up getting a job as an associate producer at WCBS, which is the CBS affiliate here in New York. And so I was working for their 5 p.m. newscast.
I see.
Which is
Those are good hours.
Yeah, it's good. It was good. Yeah, it was a more regular, schedule. But each newscast is a little different. So it was interesting to sort of see, the demographic is different, who's watching, what kind of stories you're going to do at different times. So I got to learn a lot about that. And there were many, many newscasts at CBS. So that was cool too. I got to fill in on a bunch of other newscasts as a producer too.
Yeah, I can imagine having the experience of different leadership, different news directors, just a whole different culture, really, I'm sure, because having grown up in the New York area myself, WPIX was more of a local channel. And WCBS, while it was maybe the local affiliate, it still had that more national feel to it, probably.
For sure. Right? Absolutely. And at the time when I was there, it was when Katie Couric was starting her show on CBS, when she was taking over the evening news.
Yes.
And so a lot of what we were doing was promoting her show and having her come and do, some promos with our anchors. And so that was a really exciting first look for me also into national news and what goes on, from the national scene, because it is different than local.
Yeah. Yeah. So you were ready after a few years at WPIX. You had grown through several different roles there, and then you were ready for that change at WCBS. And then it sounds like that role really helped you spread your wings in a lot of different directions there, right?
It did. It's interesting because when I left WPIX, I interviewed a bunch of places. Like I interviewed, everywhere. Yeah. And I was interviewed actually at Fox News Channel where I ended up, working years later for a different role. And I also had interviewed for a production director job at a company, a small production company. And it didn't work out. And then all of a sudden they came back to me when I was working at CBS and they said, the role is now open again. And we really liked you and we really think that you'd be a good fit. And will you come? And the truth is, it was one of those moments where it was like, but I just got here, but I don't know. Do I want to stay here? I'm not sure. So I did jump. I left and I went to that small production company from CBS. Because it was a lot. I was there for one role and I was being used as a producer for all these shows because they knew I knew how to produce a live newscast.
Right.
So they would put me on fill-in, and so I was like, this is not exactly what I signed up for. So I wasn't loving it as much as I thought I would initially. Plus I had been at PIX for such a long time, and that place, like my first place, was a real family. It was a real, I had been there with people. It was a real cohesive, like friendships and family. It was a different feel.
Yes.
And so I did leave, and I left because it was a role where I had an executive title, right? I was the director. I had my own office. I had my own assistant. I had regular hours, and I thought, oh, I've made it. And I got there and I sort of hated it.
The production
company. Because it wasn't we were still producing news-like segments, but we were working for clients. And that was a totally different world to me. It was like, I just want to tell the story the way it's supposed to be told, like you do as a journalist, versus, you have to have the client sign off on it. So it was very different for me. I didn't love that. And it was a good learning experience for me to do it.
Yeah.
But I when I was there, I remember Anna Nicole Smith died. And I jumped up and I was like, what are we going to do? And Nicole Smith died. And everyone looked at me like, what are you talking about? We do nothing. We don't react to breaking news. This is not a newsroom, And I thought, I think I need to get back into a newsroom. I need that.
That must have felt frustrating to you at that point. Yeah. Wow. But good for you for taking the leap and trying different things. I mean, it sounds like at that point you had enough experience in your career to be able to try some different things and take some chances. And you were willing to do that.
I wanted to see what else was there. I mean, the news business is exciting, and it keeps you going, but it also is exhausting.
Yeah.
Especially when you're producing live news. It's a lot. It takes its toll because, the stress levels are super high. You never know if things are going to change right in front of you. A story breaks and your whole rundown gets thrown out and you have to start over.
Right.
Or you don't know, something happens, your lead anchor, something happens to them, or your lead reporter can't get the story on time. So they can't, you never know what's going to happen, which is exciting, but also it could cause an ulcer, after a while.
Yeah. Well, and then it sounds like what you were describing too. There's also just the kinds of things that I see as a career coach, which is, every organization has its own kind of culture. Some feel more like a family and some feel more like a corporation, so to speak. And there's that business side to it. And some treat people like they're just moving parts they can move around, and some take other factors into consideration. And so it really varies how they manage or use their human resources, so to speak. And so I've seen over and over again how people make different moves from one organization to another based on how they feel valued and appreciated in what they're contributing to the organization. So, that kind of thing can really make a difference too, in terms of where you feel that your talents and your strengths and your skills are best used. So, so it sounds like that production company was a very valuable part of your trajectory, but it probably didn't last that long, I'm gathering.
No, I was there a very short amount of time. I mean, I'm still friends with all the people I worked with. Like, it was a great environment. We had a lot of fun. We did a lot of great stuff, but it just wasn't for me. I had a friend who was a producer, and she had just gotten a job at Fox News, working in their health department. And I remember she emailed me, and I was sitting in that office that I was so excited to have, but that I was just like, what am I doing here? And she emailed me and said, do you know anybody who wants to produce health segments? Because we need another producer. And I said, you know what? I'm interested in that. I have produced health segments before. We usually do one or two health stories in the newscast. I'm sure I could do it. And I went in, I did the interview, and I had known her. We had worked together prior. And so she was really helpful, with getting me in there and getting me the interview and all of that. And then, I was left on my own to do the interview and all that. But they hired me within a week. So within 2 weeks, I was like, okay, I'm on to the next thing. And that was it. It was a real fast turnaround. And then I stayed there for over 10 years.
Wow. And you were doing health segments the entire time, right?
Yeah, all health and wellness. And it was really the best of both worlds for me because I got to still be in the environment with news, but I actually worked for .com. So we didn't produce a live show. This was a little different for me because I was so used to preparing and being able to produce for one show. But this, we were producing for the web. When I first got there, health website was there, but what they would do is they would take whatever health segments they did on air on the channel and put it on the website. But instead, we were producing original content. So we had just started that. So we really started it from scratch of creating our original stuff to put on the website and then also share with TV. So we became the hub of video for health for Fox News Channel and for the affiliates.
So that was a big shift for you in general, that it wasn't just sort of reacting to something that was happening in the moment. You could really be more planful about it and really put some time and energy into some of these stories.
Oh, for sure. So we had a longer lead time. If the patient, I worked with a lot of patients and a lot of doctors. If the patient didn't work out, okay, it's fine. We can just move it and find somebody else. Let's find the right fit. Whereas in day-to-day news, it's like, I have to make it work. This has to be good enough. We'll take it. We'll do what we can with it. So that was nice. And then also being able to integrate articles, because that was part of it too, how people were finding us. So that was a big shift for me as well, because I had been used to writing, for television where you're seeing titles that as you're watching, right? The titles they put on the screen. Now it was, what are people searching for, right? Mm-hmm. So it might not be the snappiest title,
right,
but it's more simplified, right? What are 5 ways to, I don't know, get better teeth. I don't know, whatever it is, right? Like that might be something someone Googles versus 5, sparkly ways to get a better smile. Like I'm not going to search for that as a consumer, right? So thinking through that really taught me a lot about, SEO and the internet, like all that kind of stuff. So that was really fun because it used my skills, but also I got to learn a lot.
Right. And 10 years, that was your longest gig, huh?
Oh yeah. 10 and a half years. So I started there as a producer and then I worked my way up to senior producer. And and so it was great, but I had a great team. And we just had a good time. That was the best part, is that, my boss was fun. He was a full-time doctor as well.
Oh.
So he was around, but not always around.
Uh-huh.
So that was good, because we got to do our thing. And then when he came in and we needed him, to be the anchor, he would do that. But we got to really run the show, and it was a really fun environment. And it's why I was able to stay for 10 and a half years, because it just was for me, it was really about our team and, what we were producing and doing health and wellness. I didn't know that I would love it that much, but I did, because it was stuff that I could use myself. It wasn't just the stuff that we were doing on local news, the fires and the tragedies and that stuff it's important for people to know, but it's exhausting to cover that.
Right. Well, and with health and wellness, you also, I would imagine, were getting feedback from your audience about how helpful you were being too. I can imagine that there was maybe a more positive cycle.
Oh, for sure. Absolutely. Like, this is something that I teach all my media training clients too, is that how can you be of service?
Right.
That is the world that I really come from, is that, I think that media, television, it's a public service because you're there to inform people. How is your life going to change? How is your life different? Whether it be, because of tragic things or because now you're drinking matcha tea, there's, right. You can really spin it any way you want, but how can you be of service to help that person?
Right. Right. How did you decide then that it was time to complete that?
Mm-hmm. It was difficult because I still loved it. It was a really great gig and I really enjoyed the work that I did there. But about 5 years in, I wrote my book. So I had started, my first book is Blissful Thinking.
I see.
And at the time, it was sort of that thing where it's like, I loved what I was doing, but I knew there could be something else. And I was learning about, at the time, like, what is a blog? I started a blog in, 2014 on list making because I was really good at that, and so I thought, I'll just try this as a fun side project. And then that turned into a book.
Ah,
And then from there, I started doing speaking and I started teaching and and everyone was like, oh, what are you doing with this book? And so I gave it as much as I could while I was there, but I wasn't really promoting it in the way that you would promote a book because I didn't want to distract from my full-time job.
sure.
So, now with my new book, Listful Living, that just came out, it's a journal. And, now I work for myself full time. And so this is my full time job, to be able
Right.
to promote this book and teach and speak and, still work with media training clients and
Right.
things so that I can, help authors and people who are looking to be out in the world
Right.
to spread their message. Because I know from the inside, which people got picked and which people didn't get picked. But for me, I just knew the thing that was really propelling my career, this job was now holding me back.
Yeah.
And I knew I couldn't fully show up and promote this book and be as excited about all my other things if I stayed. And it was a really difficult decision, but I've been out now 2.5 years,
Okay.
and it's been fabulous. But there was a lot of overlap. I was still sort of doing things, and it's funny because when I finally told everyone, like, I'm gonna go, I'm leaving. I give them like 2 months notice or something crazy, and they're like, oh yeah, but we were wondering when you would eventually go because you do so many other things,
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, this is a surprise to no one,
But you're glad that you made that.
Oh, for sure. Absolutely. And, I have to say, I was back at Fox News. They interviewed me for my new book, which
Sure.
was terrific. So it was really nice. It was fun to be sort of on the other side of it.
Yeah.
I still wrote the script, but, I can't help myself. I had to.
You produced the whole segment.
I did, but,
Oh, that's great. That's great. So now so when you left Fox, did you have the full idea of what this business would look like, what you have going on now, or were you just thinking, I know there's some other things out there that I would like to be doing, and I know it looks like speaking, or it looks like writing another book, or it looks like training other people and how to have a good presence with the media. Did you know what that would all look like, or has it evolved?
I'm a big planner. I love a great plan, but
I get that.
yes, I like a good checklist. But I had just enough of the plan.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I had a lot of good groundwork. And so, I was able to really set myself up to say, okay, I'm going to get a few clients before I leave. So I had a few media training clients already ready to go when I left. I had my online course, Lights, Camera, Expert. I had already launched that. So that already existed.
Ah, okay.
So I already started, I already had a mastermind group that I had put together. So I had things in place. All of those things have evolved. It's all changed in the 2.5 years, and I still am thinking, like, how am I going to do this? Or do I want to do this anymore? Do I want to change that? But I think that's the world of an entrepreneur, right? You sort of just, change on the fly. I'm still working it out. Because there's a lot to what I do, with the books and productivity and time management. I talk a lot about that. And then on the other side, it's, media and video. It's two different things. I mean, they all go together because it's me and I'm able to kind of incorporate them. But it can be a challenge at times to say, what am I going to focus on? How am I going to integrate all of it?
Sure. Yeah, as you were talking about that, I was thinking about how you said, I like to plan, I like my lists, and all that. And yet it's interesting to look at the juxtaposition of your books and the planning. And yet we started at the beginning talking about how you've always been so curious and how you, throughout your career, have to some degree allowed yourself to take some risks, to jump into some things, not knowing exactly what you're getting into every time. I mean, to some degree you did,
sure.
but you definitely allowed yourself to take some risks. So it's an interesting kind of, I don't want to say balance, because I don't think any of us are terribly balanced. I think we all have a blend of something. But I'm curious about this blend for you between lists and being planful, and yet having been in the news business where things can change on a dime and being ready for anything. How do you figure that out within yourself? How does that work for you?
Yeah, that's so interesting. I never thought of it that way, but now that you sort of laid it out this way, it's true. It's sort of like if there was a pattern to all of the things that I did here.
Yeah.
The lists really come to play in the doing, right? In
Okay.
the actual either decision making or also, in being the best possible employee or boss for myself or whatever that I can possibly be, because that's how I was able to figure out how to get things done, was to use these lists and really, have checklists and know, okay, this has to happen, that has to happen. I have to, from television, what's coming next all the time, but
Yeah.
then everything could blow up really, and then you can just really go and change everything up. But it's been a little bit of both, to your point, to be able to plan just enough because I still planned,
Yeah.
but to not know really what was going to happen. And that it's a push, that's scary. That's something that is something that I look back, and when I was making this decision to leave, a friend of mine who's a coach, she said, "But you did it every other time and you were fine."
Yeah.
In many little ways, right?
Yes. Yeah.
You were always fine. You've done this before. You're on the same path, and then you change it, and then you go up again, and I said, "Oh, you're right. It's not so scary, actually. It's totally doable."
I think it's interesting because it's clear that you have a sort of a deep sense of being planful and organized, and yet you also enjoy your kind of curiosity and sense of excitement and being on the ready for just about anything. And it's like you could be ready for anything, and maybe even you have 5 different lists for whatever shows up.
Right, exactly. Yes.
And so it's kind of it's like I feel like you have the best of both worlds almost, And I love the blend of what you bring to what you do. It's wonderful.
Oh, well, thank you. And also, as a creative person, somebody
Yeah.
who's a writer, and I'm actually working on a fiction book right now. So I'm doing some different kind of writing, but I need structure around that. So that's the thing. It's like as much as I'll say, "Oh yeah, I should do that," I'll do it. If I don't schedule the time, if I don't lay out the plan of like, here's the things I think are going to happen in the book, so maybe I should write some scenes about this and that, then I feel lost. So
Yeah.
I do need to use a little bit of that structure even to be creative.
Yeah, interesting. Interesting. That's great. Well, this has been so much fun. I've loved hearing about your career and where you've been and where you are now, and anything else new coming up for you that we should know about.
Yeah, I mean the book that I'm working on, we'll see what happens with that. So that's my project for this year, is to write this book and just get out there, do some more speaking, do some more corporate trainings, things like that, to help people be less burned out.
Yeah.
Any way that I can help people to sort of not be stressed out, and because as a health producer too, I saw the effects of stress on our body, mind, and soul, and lists are just one way to help you out of that. So I'm thrilled to share it.
Everything that you've done with your books, with your work, will be in our show notes, so people will be able to access all of that. I am the proud owner of your most recent book, and thank you for that. And
yes, of course.
I highly recommend it. So, Paula Rizzo, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you. This has been very fun.
Thank you for listening to the Work from the Inside Out podcast. For more information, you can find us at www.workfromtheinsideout.com.